Hey everyone, hope you guys are enjoying Monster Hunter in whichever fashion you're choosing to play it as. And today I'm going to have a little bit of a discussion topic when it comes to just weapons being streamlined into the Monster Hunter franchise and specifically the introduction of new weapons. I think there's been an ongoing discussion in the community as a whole regarding the potential addition of a new weapon into the next mainline game, Monster Hunter Generation 6, and I think most players will be very happy to just be able to see one new weapon being added into the franchise. However, I've also seen an entirely different discussion being had with the potential idea that players would also be, or how would they react if Capcom were to decide to basically add an entirely brand new batch of weapon while disregarding the 14 weapons that we all know and love from the franchise as a whole. Weapons that we have seen basically since Monster Hunter 4, and basically present the entire franchise with a fresh new take on a bunch of new weapons and to see how players react to them. While I do think that would be an interesting idea and an interesting new twitch, an entirely new batch of weapons, I'm not necessarily sure everyone would be on board, since the 14 weapons already have certainly favorites. Everyone favorites one specific weapon or another, and I think a more middle better ground would be certainly the introduction of an entirely new batch of weapons. Let's just say maybe 5 or so, but certainly bring back maybe 5 or 7 new or the older weapons back into the fold to round out the roster. Certainly, I don't think every new weapon would replace the old weapons, but I think it would be an interesting idea of mixing them up all at the same time. So with that being said, while I do think it would be a great addition for the franchise as a whole for them to bring an entirely new batch of weapons, and I personally think that would be a magnificent idea, I'm not necessarily sure they would ditch most of the weapons that I already have available. So today, I also wanted to touch upon a recent article that I read from Game Rant discussing 5 weapons that the next Monster Hunter game needs to keep. Essentially, their top 5 weapons tier list, not necessarily of power or popularity, but weapons that signify the franchise as a whole that cannot necessarily be ditched no matter what. So if you were to have Capcom choosing to bring in, let's say, 5 new weapons, but not necessarily overwhelm players with 19 weapons available all at once. Instead, they choose to bring 5 old weapons with the 5 new weapons and then just kind of mix things up from there, potentially adding more as downloadable content or as the expansion essentially comes through in the future. It would be an interesting twist to the experience nonetheless. I want to give a huge shout out once again to Game Rant and Liam Ferguson for putting out a really interesting article, just providing their opinions on their 5 weapons that they would like to see if this type of shakeup were to happen. And I also want to encourage you guys in the comments to do let me know what weapons you would like to see just return no matter what. Maybe because they're your mains, but just maybe a weapon that you simply have not been able to get a chance to play with that you've always kind of wanted to. The article opens up with a strong stable of monsters alongside the weapons used to hunt them have been at Monster Hunter's core since the very beginning. Monster Hunter World had to address that formula growing pains by drastically decreasing the initial monster count, ensuring they could be all smoothly remade for being in their HD debut. By the time Monster Hunter World Iceborne's post-launch support finished, there were more than enough monsters to be prepared for Monster Hunter Rise to avoid Monster Hunter World's issues, and fans are confident that the next mainline game will benefit the same. That leaves the weapons, which have belonged to the same 14 families in the mainline games since the Japanese 2013 release of Monster Hunter 4. It is unlikely that weapon types will be lost at this point, but there are some redundancies in their lineups that the future titles could temporarily remove to rework. And in the next mainline entry, rumored to be Monster Hunter World 2, which I kind of push back on those rumors, takes this approach to streamline the gameplay and characters progression, and it needs to keep 5 specific weapons at play. And they basically go down through their 5 weapons that they kind of think should be making their way, which is, interestingly enough, I will say this, then the lineup of weapons that you will be able to see in Monster Hunter Now. So for example, in Now, the developers from Niantic specifically mentioned that the weapons that they chose were the more popular ones and the more accessible weapons, or so they thought. Of course, that left a lot of the other weapons like hunting horn or insect glaive, for example, which are a little bit more intricate, if you will, not being connected into the game or not being added. Not even when it comes to the leaked weapons right now, those two are being mentioned. So it is one of those situations where what they think to be more intricate weapons are currently not available there, and some sort of shakeup will most likely remove those more intricate weapons and just leave the base type weapons that you would expect with some interesting twist. In the article, they mentioned that greatsword, even since the first Monster Hunter's box art, greatswords have stood at the face of the franchise. Electric weapons. These humongous blades are specialized to be the heaviest and the slowest weapons in any Monster Hunter title, even if they make no physical sense. However, that doesn't mean they don't have a high skill ceiling, and veteran hunters can fling their quarry around like they themselves are massive beasts. As the epitome of the series' trademark weight combat, it is impossible to imagine the future of Monster Hunter games leaving great swords behind. My only pushback to this would be that great swords, being a traditional face of the franchise type weapon, and I do agree with that statement, I think there have been better options. Switch axe to me has always been a faster, more agile, better version of that same type of idea. Although, of course, it plays completely different. And another one of the weapons that they mention is dual blades. Similarly, the dual blades represent Monster Hunter's combat as most frenetic. Beyond even the sword and shield and long swords, the dual blades are all about building momentum until the players whirly around death. If the new Monster Hunter title were to streamline its weapon types, dual blades and greatswords will most likely remain as both iconic parts of the hunter's kits and support these two extreme styles of melee weapons. Again, my only pushback to this is that dual blades didn't even make the cut for base Monster Hunter now. So to me, it seems like even the developers are kind of like, well, holding two swords isn't really all that different than just holding one sword. So although we all understand that the gameplays are very different, maybe their approach, and it is one of the more popular weapons at the end of the day, certainly more popular than greatswords. So I always question why they left it out of Monster Hunter now, and for them to leave it out of potential next mainline game, if they were to revamp the weapons altogether, would be certainly an interesting idea. Another one of the weapons that they mentioned here is the light bowgun, which is a surprise to me, quite honestly. On topic of more iconic weapons, before the franchise even had regular bows, it had bowguns. These anachronistic firearms remain one of the biggest holdouts from the classic Monster Hunter days, and making that a player can craft every other consumable items. Bowguns, unlike bows, use finite amounts of ammunition, allowing them to change the attack types on the fly while making mismanagements more punishing. Still, that means that clever bowgun users, especially with the flexible movement of light bowguns, can thrive in solo or team play at any range, something no other ranged Monster Hunter weapons can boast. My only pushback to that would be that I think the gameplay between light bowgun and heavy bowgun has kind of been, that gap has been bridged closer and closer in almost each and every single most recent release. So to me, if they were going to revamp something and they really want to shake things up, I would imagine that they try to bring in like medium bowguns, a weapon that was already introduced once already into the franchise. Certainly they kind of thought it was redundant at one point or another, but kind of like the reintroduction of that weapon would probably go a long way. If again, the entire idea is to shake up the weapons roster, making that jump from like light bowgun to heavy bowgun. Well, let's just say, we all know that light bowgun is way more popular than heavy bowgun, and heavy bowgun is kind of like just for abusing certain hunts that you can just kind of abuse monsters in general. You see heavy bowgun videos quite often as they're abusing a monster, and light bowgun is not necessarily the same. So if they can kind of bridge that gap even closer by just bringing back medium bowgun, I think probably the shake would be complete, more so than just bringing light bowgun and disregarding heavy bowgun and its differences. Another one of the weapons that they mentioned here is the insect glaive. Not every Monster Hunter weapon fills an obvious role in the battlefield. Insect glaive may be the best example of this, having been introduced to emphasize Monster Hunter 4's newly vertical environments and jumping attacks by allowing users to vault into the air at any time. Complete with ranged insect systems types buffs, DPS, insect glaives are one of the most unique and interactive weapons in Monster Hunter with Monster Hunter enemies and environments, and it would be a shame to see them go. The only pushback I have to their description is that they actually don't give you a true reason to bring them back. They are unique for sure, absolutely. I enjoyed the insect glaive when I played with it, but it doesn't really bring anything to the fold. If it became one of those weapons that the Kinsect not only boosts you, but then also provides a debuff to a monster, then we can be talking. It can become one of those weapons that something has gone a little bit on the wayside, but like poisons, paralyze, and sleep. If you have your Kinsect constantly, not just necessarily your weapon being tied to an elemental, debuff or like para hits or anything along those lines, but the actual Kinsects themselves, if you string along X amount of hits in a row to a certain weak part, maybe not only do you guarantee your break or like you make them break a little bit easier, but also potentially provide, some sort of status debuff, make them tired, make them a little bit slower, make them do something that like provides a little bit of benefit boost in the same way that the hunting horn provides a boost to all of the hunters. Hunting horns are usually weapons that are supportive weapons for you and your hunting party, and the insect glaives could be the opposite of that. They could be the debuffers to the monsters themselves. There's already other types of weapons that should be doing that already, and they're not. So the insect glaive probably's a niche spot would be beneficial there in that regard. And talking about the hunting horn, lastly they mentioned that even a more unique weapon in Monster Hunter's fantastical armaments are the hunting horns, massive clubs equipped with buffing songs for up and close support. Their single player outings have historically been less useful than hunting parties, but Monster Hunter Rise made a hunting horn significantly stronger, alongside giving their active buffs more ways to keep the rewards from keeping them applied. Now, more viable than ever, these hard-hitting instruments would stay in players' hands to emphasize the Monster Hunter's variety, lighthearted tone, and sense of camaraderie. And my only pushback to that would be you need to speed up the hunting horn. It's a little bit too technical if you actually try to use it as a weapon. The KO benefits are not as good as what they used to be. Yes, you can still keep your songs up as most as possible now, certainly more than ever. But as an actual viable weapon, if you remove, I know the buffs are specifically tied to what the weapon is supposed to bring, but if you just remove the idea of the buffs themselves, the weapon isn't necessarily all that useful or beneficial. Like, it doesn't really do high DPS. It's really slow. It's a little bit cumbersome. You kind of really need to be at an advanced hunter to be able to really get a good like a speed run type thing with a hunting horn. And it just becomes a little bit too cumbersome. So for me personally, I would hope that they would like speed them up a little bit, make them a little bit faster, maybe not necessarily crazy slow wind-ups. They could be sped up a little bit, provide a little bit more variety into the combos that you can do with them, and of course just keep the speed of the buffs in order for you to be able to keep them up a little bit faster. Just at the end of the day, just speed the weapons up all around a little bit more, and I think it would continue to be one of those popular weapons. You saw in Rise and Sunbreak, it was pretty popular early on, but it kind of fell off a little bit after like Sunbreak, once people kind of got used to their weapons, and hunting horn players certainly diminished at that point. But certainly, once again, I want to give a huge shout out to Game Rant and Liam Ferguson for their interesting article, and just the entire thought experiment as a whole, that Capcom would decide to bring in an entirely new patch of weapons, ditch most of the ones, if not all of the ones that they have, but they would certainly need to bring in a few others to keep players entertained, and certainly some of the ones mentioned today would be on the top of the list. But if you're brand new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya!